His voice arrives before he does. Armand Viral doesn't need to enter a room. He cuts into it, the way a blade cuts into something it's already decided to separate. The Citadel of Varnesse barely has time to settle before his words land in the center of it, flat and final. She has no place here. The last footsteps die. The chamber goes still, and every eye in the room, council members, envoys leaning over the upper rails, guards who've learned not to move before they're told, all of them turn toward the obsidian floor. Toward her. Lasara Dane doesn't flinch. She's standing alone beneath the hanging iron lights, and the light is doing her no favors. It catches everything. The stillness in her shoulders, the absence of any of the small betrayals a body makes when it's afraid. There's no one beside her. Not the council. Not the envoys. Not Kaler Varen, who remains at the head of the chamber, elevated and untouchable and, notably, silent. Armand crosses toward her. His boots strike the stone with the kind of deliberate weight that's meant to be heard, the footsteps of a man who has never once had to wonder if people were listening. He stops a few paces away, studies her, and then quieter. And yet, she stands closer to power than those who earned it. The council ripples. Not loudly. This isn't that kind of room. But it's there, a current moving beneath the surface, contained and present. Lasara doesn't lower her eyes. Answer. The command hangs there for a second before the problem with it becomes visible. It isn't his to give. That's the first fracture. Kaler doesn't correct him. That's the second. Lasara feels it settle into the room. It's heavier than the accusation itself, that small, deliberate absence of correction. Authority bending. Making space for something it shouldn't. She breathes in. Once. Slow. If you want answers, she says, her voice carrying without needing to rise, you should be careful what you ask. One counselor leans forward. Another glances toward Kaler, waiting for the interruption that doesn't come. Armin's expression tightens. You speak as if you belong here. No, she replies. I speak as if you've already decided I don't. The words land clean. Too clean. They don't challenge him, they just show him, laid out in a line for everyone in the room to walk past and examine. A pause opens after them. Thin. Sharp. Armand takes another step forward. The kind of step that's supposed to make someone take one back. She doesn't move. You're here by tolerance. Nothing more. Lasara tilts her head, just slightly. Less like she's considering his words, and more like she's placing him. Then why does it bother you? The question shifts the weight, not outward, not toward the room. Inward, toward him. He doesn't answer immediately. He wasn't expecting one. That's not your concern. It became my concern the moment you made it public. The chamber tightens. Above, the watchers lean over the rail. This isn't how these exchanges go. Not here, not in Varnesse, where structure holds tighter than truth usually gets to. Armand gestures toward the council. You stand in a hall built on lineage and command. Not coincidence. And yet, she says quietly, you're asking me to justify standing in it. He exhales through his nose, controlled, barely, the sound of a man trying to release something without letting it show. Then justify it. Lasara doesn't answer. Her gaze moves, not to Armand, not to the council, but past all of them, to the figure who has remained still and elevated and unspeaking through all of it. To Kaler. For the first time since this began, she looks directly at him. He doesn't look away. He doesn't speak either. The distance between them stretches across the full length of the chamber. Held in silence, no one dares step into. Then she turns back to Armand. If I were irrelevant, she says, you wouldn't be asking. A murmur moves through the council. Someone catches it before it spreads. Armand's hand closes at his side. You mistake attention for importance. No, I recognize pressure when it's applied. That lands differently than the rest. Because now it's not about her position at all. It's about his intent. And everyone in the room has just been handed the lens to see it through. He steps closer. Close enough now that the gap between their status should feel undeniable. It doesn't. You think you're untouchable because he hasn't removed you. His voice drops, meant for her but carrying exactly far enough. Lasara's pulse shifts. Once. Sharp against her ribs. Not fear. Recognition. She leans forward just enough to meet him at the same level. You think I'm here because he hasn't noticed. The words don't rise. They cut. Armand stills. Behind him, the chamber holds its breath. And then Kaler moves. Not quickly, not urgently, just down from the dais, one step at a time, and the entire room reorganizes itself around the fact of it. Authority doesn't recenter so much as it becomes visible again, clarified, a line drawn back through the room. He stops a few paces behind Armand. His presence closes the space without touching anything. That's enough. Not raised, not forced, final in the way that requires neither. Then remove her. Simple, clean, expected. The room waits, because this is the moment. The one where structure restores itself, control reasserts, and she disappears back to wherever she came from. Kaler doesn't answer. Not right away. His gaze moves past Armand, finds Lasara, and holds there. Something shifts behind his eyes. Not confusion, not approval. Something recalculating in real time. Like a man who has just discovered the map he was using is older than the territory. Lasara feels it before she fully understands it. The shift. Small, but the kind that doesn't go back. Armand follows his gaze, notices the delay, and presses. You've allowed this long enough. Kaler doesn't look at him. She stays. The words fall without weight. And still, they fracture the room. Voices rise immediately, not loud. These are people trained in restraint, but breaking through years of it. Chairs shift. Hands move. The upper tiers lean forward as the balance cracks open in front of them. Armand doesn't move. Not at first. Then slowly, he turns back to Kaler. You choose her, he says, quieter now, the words edged in something colder than anger. Over the council. Kaler's jaw tightens, almost imperceptibly. I choose what holds. But the chamber doesn't accept it. Because nothing about this feels stable. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lasara takes one step back. Not retreat. Distance. The light shifts across her face as she moves out of the center of it, the sharp clarity softening just enough to make her harder to read. The room doesn't settle. It fractures further. Armand's attention moves toward the council, toward the watching tears, toward the reaction already spreading beyond what these walls can contain. He doesn't argue again. That's what makes it worse. Because the challenge doesn't end. It changes. He looks back at Lasara, and this time there's no demand in it. Just calculation. This won't hold. Not to Kaler. To her. Then he turns and walks back toward his place without waiting for dismissal. The chamber doesn't recover. It dissolves. Groups form immediately, voices dropping, alliances sketching themselves in low urgent gestures. The structure still stands, the walls, the tiers, the iron lights still burning, but something inside it has shifted out of alignment. Lasara doesn't follow the movement. Her focus stays on Kaler. He hasn't moved. Not since the decision. Not since he broke the pattern. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The distance between them remains, uncrossed, heavy with what it now carries. Then, slowly his gaze sharpens. Not at her position. At her. Something settles into place behind it. Not certainty. Recognition. Partial. Incomplete. But enough. Lasara feels it land. And with it, the first real consequence. Not from the council. Not from Armand. From him. Because now he's looking at her like she was never meant to be where she stands. He doesn't look away. That's what unsettles her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Not the decision. Not the room breaking apart behind him. That she expected. It's the way Kaler Varen studies her now, as if the space she occupies no longer fits the shape he assigned to it. Lasara holds his gaze, doesn't step forward, doesn't lower her eyes. The distance between them stays exactly as it is, charged, deliberate, unfinished. Around them, the chamber fractures further. Counselors cluster in tight circles, voices low but urgent. The scrape of chairs against stone cuts through the rising tension. Above, the envoys lean over the railing, watching like they've just been handed something they weren't meant to see. No one addresses her. Not directly, but no one ignores her either. That's new. That's the cost. Armand doesn't return to his seat. He moves along the edge of the chamber instead, stopping where two counselors rise to meet him. Their heads draw close. Their voices drop into a murmur too controlled to follow. Lasara watches the shift. Not the words. The pattern. Positions changing. Lines redrawing without being spoken. The room reorganizing itself around a decision that shouldn't have been made. Kaler finally turns. Not toward her. Toward the chamber. Enough. The word doesn't carry far, but it doesn't need to. It presses down just enough to slow the movement without stopping it entirely. They listen. But they don't settle. That's worse. Armand glances back once, brief, precise. Not at Kaler. At her. Then he leans closer to the counselors beside him, and whatever he says next shifts something again. Subtle, but visible in the way their shoulders stiffen. Lasara feels it. The direction of it. Away from the chamber. Outward. Kaler notices too. His jaw tightens just slightly. He steps down from the last of the raised stone and moves toward the exit without another word. The council parts around him, not deference. Necessity. The path clears. Lasara doesn't wait to be summoned. She follows. The corridor outside swallows most of the noise behind them, but not all of it. Voices bleed through the stone in uneven waves, rising and falling without pattern. Kaler doesn't slow. His stride is measured, controlled, but there's a sharpness to it now, a fraction too fast for calm. Lasara keeps pace beside him, not behind. That doesn't go unnoticed. Two guards at the far archway straighten as they approach, their eyes flicking between them before settling straight ahead again. The tension in their posture lingers after they pass. Kaler turns sharply into a narrower passage, cutting away from the main hall. The air cools as they move deeper into the stone, the scent of burning oil fading into something older, quieter. He stops without warning. Lasara halts a step too close before correcting it. The silence that follows isn't empty. It waits. You stepped into that deliberately. Not an accusation. A placement. Lasara doesn't answer immediately. The stone beneath her feet holds the cold, pressing upward through the thin soles of her boots. The corridor narrows behind them, sealing off the rest of the Citadel as though it was never there. You left the space open, she says. His gaze sharpens. That wasn't an invitation. It didn't need to be. A beat passes. He studies her again, longer this time, like he's measuring something that refuses to stay still. You knew he would push. Yes. And you wanted him to. No. The answer lands too quickly to soften. Kaler's expression doesn't change, but something in his stance shifts, subtle, contained. Then why step forward at all? Lasara exhales once slow, because stepping back would have closed the only opening left. She doesn't say it. Instead, she holds his gaze. You didn't stop me, she says again. The words settle differently this time. Not deflection. Responsibility. Kaler's eyes flicker, just for a second. Then he looks away. Not far. Just enough. Down the corridor, where a faint echo of movement drifts from the direction of the outer gates. It shouldn't be this loud. Not this early. He listens. So does she. Boot steps. More than a few. Not ordered. Not disciplined. But moving with purpose. Kaler turns back to her. Armand doesn't wait. No. He doesn't move alone either. Lasara feels the shift before she sees it. The way his focus narrows. The way the corridor seems to compress around them as the sound grows clearer. The vote hasn't been called. And already movement begins. He's pulling from the eastern tiers, Kaler says, quieter now. Faster than he should be able to. Because he's been preparing longer than you think. The words hang there. He doesn't dismiss them. That's the problem. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Another set of footsteps joins the first. Heavier. Carrying differently through the stone. Armored, not ceremonial. Kaler steps past her, moving toward the bend in the corridor where it opens back toward the lower levels. Lasara follows. The passage widens. The air shifts. Firelight reaches them first, uneven shadows stretching along the walls before the space opens fully. What waits beyond isn't the quiet gathering it should be. Torches burn in tighter clusters than they should. Figures move in patterns that don't belong to routine assembly. Not yet confrontation, but close enough to feel the edge of it. Kaler stops at the threshold, doesn't step out. Lasara stands beside him now, close enough that the heat from the nearest torch brushes against her skin. The outer clans aren't waiting. They're positioning. She watches the lines form, the spacing, the gaps left where movement will be needed. Her pulse shifts. Once. Sharp. Familiar. Kaler doesn't look at her when he speaks. How many of them are his? Lasara doesn't answer immediately. Her eyes track the movement, the subtle signals, the uneven clustering, the way certain figures don't turn their backs fully even in conversation. She counts without counting, measures without showing it. Then, enough. The word settles heavier than it should. Kaler's hand tightens slightly at his side. Below them, one of the clusters breaks apart faster than the rest. A figure cuts through it, taking a direct path toward the inner gates. Not wandering, not waiting, heading straight for the Citadel. Lasara's gaze locks onto him. Something in the way he moves, too direct, too certain. Who is that? Lasara doesn't answer, because she doesn't recognize the man. She recognizes the movement, and the moment it settles into place, she understands. What Armand started inside the chamber wasn't the challenge. It was the signal. Her voice drops, barely above the crackle of the torches. It's already moving. Kaler turns to her sharply, but she's not looking at him anymore. Her focus stays on the figure closing the distance to the gates, because if that line reaches the Citadel before the council regains control, then the vote won't matter, and whatever comes next won't wait for permission. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The gates don't close. They stay open just enough for the cold to move through, carrying the scent of ash and damp stone into the lower terraces. No one gives the order to seal them. No one steps forward to change it. Lasara stands where the threshold meets the worn edge of the courtyard, her hand resting lightly against the iron that should have been locked hours ago. The metal is cool, unmoving, like it belongs to something older than any decision made inside these walls. Behind her, the Citadel breathes in low, uneven rhythms. Voices rise, then fall. Not arguments anymore. Not commands. Just fragments. Kaler is somewhere above, within the inner halls where the council has not fully dissolved and not fully held together. The silence he left behind in the chamber has spread through the stone, settling into corners that don't release it easily. He didn't call her back. He didn't stop her from leaving either. The courtyard stretches outward, quieter now than it should be after what moved through it. Torches burn lower. Their flames bend in the slow draft slipping between the gates. The formations that held shape earlier have loosened into scattered figures, each one carrying a piece of something that no longer aligns. Lasara watches the empty space where the lines had formed, where the first movement began. It doesn't look different. That's what lingers. A guard crosses the far edge of the courtyard, his steps slower than before, armor loosened at the shoulders. He doesn't look toward her. No one does. Not out of dismissal. Out of distance. She is no longer placed. Not among them. Not above them. Just unclaimed. Her fingers curl slightly against the iron. For a moment, she doesn't move. The wind shifts, brushing past her, catching the edge of her sleeve, and lifting it just enough to break the stillness. The fabric settles again, soft against her wrist. A memory presses in, not fully, not clearly, just the weight of standing still while others decided where she would belong. The difference now sits in the space between that memory and this moment. No voice fills it. No command follows. From within the Citadel, a door closes somewhere deep in the corridor system. The sound travels oddly through the stone, muted, delayed, like it's unsure where to land. Lasara turns her head slightly, not toward the sound, just enough to feel the direction of it. Kaler doesn't come. She doesn't wait. Her hand leaves the gate without hesitation. The iron remains where it is, cold and unchanged. She steps forward, crossing the threshold into the open space beyond the Citadel walls. The ground shifts underfoot, from worn stone to uneven earth. Softer, less certain. No one stops her. No one follows. Behind her, the gates stay open. The light from the courtyard stretches outward in a narrow line before fading into the dark. She pauses just past it, not turning back, not moving further. The quiet here is different. It doesn't press. It doesn't hold. It leaves space. For a moment, the absence feels heavier than anything that came before it. Then, it settles. Lasara inhales, slow and steady. The air is sharper beyond the walls. It carries no voices, no expectations, no structure waiting to close around her. Only distance. Behind her, the Citadel stands exactly as it did, unchanged, unaffected, and yet, she doesn't step back into it. The wind moves again, stronger this time, pulling at the loose strands of her hair, shifting them across her face before letting them fall. She doesn't brush them away, doesn't anchor herself to anything behind her. In the space where she stands, there is no command to follow, no role to return to, only the weight of having stepped through, and the quiet that answers it.